Hello, this is Paul, the Oaken Knight, with our continuing Drive on Giessen campaign. Where we left off, we had just finished the interface between the early AM turn and the late morning turn. The Soviets elected to continue the drive on the three southernmost areas along the main axis of advance, while holding up in the far north to recoup casualties suffered earlier. I will play out the battle for Fulda for your viewing fun, but in this video I will summarize the action in the two areas to the north. In the American sector just north of Fulda, we have a single American armored cavalry troop defending against a Soviet Guards tank battalion, plus a Soviet Guards recon battalion. The Americans are deployed along a massive hill that comprises most of the western map in the engagement. The Soviets are attacking through a densely wooded map whose only real clearing is in the center. Further, the only objectives on the east map are also in the center, so the Soviet attack for all practical purposes must go down the middle. Note: Drive on Giessen maps are geomorphic. I think this is the right approach for this game, but there is one design choice that has been made that should be apparent to you at this point. The issue is how to handle the seams between the boards. Geomorphic maps work because terrain that appears on the edge of any given map is always carried through onto all other maps, such that terrain always matches up going from board to board. The designers for World at War 85 opted to carry over only linear terrain, roads and rivers, from one map to the next. On some maps, the transition from one map to the next is smooth, but on others, in particular highly wooded maps, the hexes along the map edge have a sort of bowling alley effect where the vegetation simply disappears up and down the entire column. In scenarios we have already played, I've tried to compensate by placing minefields along the board edge, but at this point I think we need a house rule. I see two ways to go. East to west board edges could simply be designated as unplayable. If nobody can go there, then you don't need to worry about the bowling alley. Or two, my preferred approach would be to allow units to use the board edge, but whenever both neighboring hexes in the adjacent hex column contain terrain, that terrain is considered to be repeated in the board X hedge. From now on, that is what I will do. So it is written, so it shall be done. It's good to be a referee. Back to our Americans. There were originally two American armored cav companies in the battle area at the start of the turn, but because the cav now protecting Fulda had the bejesus shot out of them in the first battle, one armored cav company was tasked to move south to bolster the defense at Fulda. To compensate, all the Apache H-64s available, plus all the observation helos, were sent to our current battle area. Aside from allowing copious Hellfire missile fire raining in on the attackers, the observation helos will modify the surprise die roll in NATO's favor. A very good thing considering the expected appearance of the Soviet recon battalion. The battle was pretty short, actually. The weather closed in almost immediately with a squall that significantly degraded shots at longer ranges. But however, squalls only have an effect for one turn only. But this gave the Soviets a chance to drive pell-mell down the central road and grab the first objective town, taking no losses. Going forward, both sides exchanged fire and casualties mounted. The Apaches took full advantage of their long-range Hellfire missiles and tipped the balance of fire in the Americans' favor. In the end, the Americans were able to hold off the attack, but chose to give up on defending the area, continuing to retire and trade space for time. The second engagement saw a rematch between the German territorials and an accompanying Panzer Recon Company against the Soviet Motor Rifle Battalion, plus the T-64s of a Soviet Tank Battalion. In their initial attack, the Soviets had been surprised, with the Guards Motor Rifle Battalion taking about 30% losses before the weather forced the attack to be called off. The Soviet T-64s fared better as they did significant damage to the Bundeswehr recon forces, taking only 10% loss in return. This battle zone was much more open than in the southern engagement, with a single modest hill on the westernmost map, providing an advantaged firing position to the NATO forces. But here, as before, NATO achieved surprise, and once again the territorials were not required to be placed on the map. The Soviet forces advanced up and down the line, taking 2 of the 3 objectives almost immediately. Then a Soviet Su-25 attack destroyed the half-strength Leopard 1 platoon, and the only NATO tank in the battle space was destroyed. War is hell, and then you're NATO. 2 troops of Cobra gunships managed to pin down the Soviet air defense, but were not able to cause much in the way of casualties to the Soviet tanks. As elements of the Guards motor rifle pushed westward, the territorial infantry began to show themselves. Milan missiles flew to some effect, but then the Soviets responded with an effective EW attack, separating the German territorial headquarters from its subordinate units. The effect was quick. The defending Martyrs and other and sundry ATGM armed units could no longer coordinate as they had done earlier in the day. The Soviets, with the advantage, were able to exchange fire effectively. While still suffering casualties, they were able to exchange units at a favorable rate. Then, to make matters worse, the Soviet off-board artillery delivered the first non-persistent nerve agent attack we have seen thus far. The territorials, with a lower training level than most NATO formations, lost about 50% of the units defending. Bad day to be a territorial. From there, it was simply a matter of time before NATO folded, while once again NATO prevented a breakthrough, but casualties in both defending units came to a robust 67%. On the Soviet side, losses were more moderate, but still the motor rifle troops ended the engagement down 60%, with the T-64 still doing okay, down a mere 20%. While all will have a chance to recover at turn's end, some formations may need to disengage and rest to build up to an effective level. So in the next video, I will show the detailed playthrough action at Fulda, and will finish the late morning turn of the campaign. Then finally, West German reinforcements will begin to arrive to plug the holes. Still, the American Reforger troops are nowhere to be seen. Until then, this is Paul, the Yoken Knight. Please subscribe if you like the series, and have yourselves a pleasant evening.